Hi, if I could please ask everybody to take their seats. We're going to be getting started in like less than a minute. Thank you.
Fine. You know what you say here, Peter? And then we're just there's four of us. Well, you go boy, girl, boy, boy.
Boy, girl, boy, boy. Okay, you're the boss.
Hey, Justin, seeing that we're running late, so it's a hard stop at 4:40, 4:55, right? Okay. So, okay. All right. No worries.
Well, because I wanted to do this.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to get our second panel started. This is the panel of not-for-profit leaders. And again, we have our moderator, Larry Ma. I'd like to introduce Peter Chang, who is the head of the Hong Fook Foundation. And as I mentioned before, Dr. Ming Tat Cheng couldn't be here because he's unwell. Sonia Chong, who is the chair of the Canadian Foundation for Chinese Heritage Preservation. We also have Sunny Ho, who heads up the Foundation for Care First, and Kai Tao, who's involved in a number of philanthropic activities, but I know him from the Red Cross Home to Home campaign. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Justin, and welcome everyone. Hope your breakout session was productive. So earlier this afternoon, we had the point of view of the philanthropists. So those who actually gave money. We talked about how they like to be engaged, how they like to be steward and approach. This panel is the reverse. So it is about agencies that actually are engaging and rather successfully the Chinese community. And I know what you're thinking. You look up the panel, they're all Chinese. So therefore, by default, they have to be successful. I will counter that by saying this, that each of these agencies, when they first started, nobody knew who they were. And they started plotting and planning and got to a point where they were successful in engaging the Chinese community. And they will share with you today some of the things that they've done, best practices, some trends looking forward, and so on and so forth. So I'd like to, just maybe throw out a question, and anyone can feel free to jump in. There's microphones here, and Sunny, you have a microphone as well. The first question I want to throw, and we sort of talked a bit about this earlier, is, the Chinese community in Toronto has changed drastically over the last 10, 15 years. Certainly at one point in time, there was the group from Canton, Toisan. Then the Hong Kong Chinese came in, and so on and so forth. How is that posed to be a challenge for your agencies in terms of how you go out and raise money from such a diverse Chinese community? So, anyone wants to weigh in on that?
Well, maybe.
Peter?
Yeah, I think I have the thickest skin, so I start. The way Hong Fook started, I represent an organization called the Hong Fook Mental Health Foundation. We actually started 30 years ago. We incorporated 30 years ago, but actually we started before that. The challenge at that time was that there was a lack of access to mental health services. Mental health is different from other medical services in that language and culture are paramount in helping the client. And we encountered some situation. I think the barrier were twofold. One was from the mainstream community. Let's say the hospitals say that we cannot really help this person because we cannot communicate with them. And then there's the other barrier where patients feel that it's shameful to be mentally ill or to have mental illness in the family is something to be ashamed of, so they don't talk about it. So there's a dual barrier there. We felt that in order to overcome this access, a group of us got together, doctors, psychiatrists, social workers, public health nurses. We started to meet just privately after hours to talk about this problem. How do we overcome it? So it's a long answer to your question about the changing landscape. At that time, in 1970s, the dominant dialect in Chinatown was Toisan. I understand you're Toisan too.
I'm
right?
Toisan.
Unless you speak Toisan, you're not really Chinese. I speak Cantonese. So my patients view me with suspicion. Anyway, but after that, I think the way Hong Kong developed is that we rose to the challenge. If we started off serving people who spoke Toisanese, Cantonese, and then in 1970s, boat people came, and we also serve Vietnamese. So we're different from maybe other Chinese organizations, is that we also serve Vietnamese, Cambodian, and later Koreans. So it's more of an Asian mental health organization. And the way we deal with the changing landscape is we provide service. If you need to speak Mandarin, we have Mandarin-speaking workers. And later now we have Korean-speaking workers, and of course we have Vietnamese, Cambodian-speaking workers. So it's more of a multicultural agency.
Okay. So what you ended up doing is you started hiring staff that could identify or relate or communicate with the various communities.
That's right. We adapt. We adapt to the challenge. And the main thinking is that we are here to provide a service. We want to improve access. We want to, our motto is mental health for all, so that you're not barred from mental health services because of language or cultural barriers. So then each group that came in, we adapt to that.
Okay, great. And that's from a service delivery standpoint. I'm more curious about from a outreach and engagement standpoint, from a fundraising perspective. And Sunny, maybe you could sort of weigh in on that from that perspective.
Okay, thank you. I just want to start by introducing my agency. My agency is Care First Senior and Community Services Association. We have been serving the Greater Toronto Area and the York region for the last 37 years. Primarily, we provide community support services to individuals, seniors, primarily homebound, frail people that they are not able to receive a lot of the supports without transportation. What Care First will be able to provide is home care. We do have certified personal support workers that are able to attend our clients' home and help them. So basically, that's what we do. We started 37 years ago by providing primarily Meals on Wheels services to. Now we do pretty much everything that you can think of. To supplement what Peter has just said, I think language is important, but as you might have heard from this earlier sessions, that it's funny that you would think that we're all Chinese people, but there are indeed subcultures, right? We do have different cultures. I also came from Hong Kong 30 plus years ago. I do not understand a lot of the Chinese culture from mainland China or mainland Chinese. So I have to learn that myself. And one of the things that I learned is trust is a very important component for the Chinese from mainland China. As soon as they trust you, everything would be so much easier, especially in terms of fundraising. So I think trust and understanding the subculture is important. Just like Benson, I don't know how to teach you because I'm still learning myself. But that's something that you should look into, learning the culture.
Kai, you want to?
Maybe I'll build in what Sandy said earlier about the subculture. As I travel across Canada, I see subcultures in Canada as well. Up in Yellowknife, for example, the Inuit people say, I am their brothers. It makes me real Canadian. On the other hand, when you go to St. John's, Newfoundland, and keys the court and drink the dark rum, I'm a Newfie. So when you talk about the Toisanese as a first generation Chinese Canadian that are actually making inroads for a younger generation like me and Sunny coming into Canada, actually they open up that society easier for us to become Canadians on one hand. On the other hand, is the challenges. As I tried to ask earlier the question to Mr. Alan Ma about certain distrust about the mainland Chinese coming now staying in China, in Canada. How to overcome that distrust, for example, on NGOs, given the background and some not so good experience in some cases. On the other hand, then Mr. Ma, remember he said, there's actually 3 different categories of even mainland Chinese within the Chinese from mainland. Never mind the Hong Kong Chinese. I said I actually was born in China, lived in Hong Kong, and then moved to Winnipeg and become a real Canadian for the frozen part of it and love the pierogies with the Ukrainians. But that's what we are as Canadians. It's changing, is evolving. So the community, the Chinese community is evolving along the same line, I think. Then we really have to look at the different skill sets of the individual that you wanted to have somebody to open the doors for you, and yet be prepared to also evolve along with that change as well internally in the agency, with not so formal policies and not so professional upfront. And I always remember what Steve Jobs says once in his book. Not his book, but somebody wrote it, but he said it. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. It's an incredible statement. It's a powerful statement. Make it simple that we as volunteers can go to the community and explain in front of the camera, you got 30 seconds. That message is so powerful. But behind it is a lot of work behind to make that 30 seconds work. So that's what we have to do, is to build a branding and engaging the community and helping you to achieve connecting and eventually successfully fundraising and providing services back to the community, including Chinese Canadians.
Sonia, we talked about subcultures within the Chinese community. As chair of the Canadian Foundation for Chinese Heritage Preservation, has that posed to be a challenge for your organization in terms of raising funds or engaging them, whether it be as volunteers or otherwise?
I think as a start, I'm just going to give a brief introduction of the foundation. And thank you for getting the name correct, because it's such a long name that people usually get it
That's why
confused.
I wrote it down.
Thank you. Our foundation was formed 20 years ago, so this year is our 20th anniversary. The mission is to promote Canadian interest in the appreciation and ultimately preservation of Chinese historical and cultural treasures. And in the process, we hope to foster closer relations and understanding between the peoples and the governments of Canada and China. So I guess our organization is slightly different from the ones here, perhaps in 2 major aspects. Number one, we are a quote-unquote cultural type organization, much like the Chinese Cultural Society here, or rather Chinese Culture Center here. Which right away, on the hierarchy of needs, it's kind of ranked more or less to the bottom, right? Closer to the bottom. Because first, you have to look at health, mental health, looking after the old folks in your community. And only when you have extra money, then you think about supporting culture. So that is, I think, one distinction. The other one is that perhaps to date, what the foundation has done is a little bit more, it incorporates external things as opposed to within Canada itself. What do I mean by that? In the last 20 years, I guess our claim to fame is that the foundation was able to hold exhibitions and primarily treasures from China, which had attracted the attendance of prime ministers and Prime Ministers of Canada, such as Jean Chrétien, as well as the past President Jiang Zemin and Premier Zhu Rongji of China. So in that sense, we were able to attract, I guess, support and attention from perhaps some of the mainstream organizations which are interested in showing the world that, you know, other than wanting to make money, that they are interested in understanding Chinese culture. In terms of changes, I have to say this, in the last 20 years, I mean, there have been so many charities and various non-profit organizations within the Chinese community in Canada, in Toronto, particularly in Toronto, that is become exceedingly competitive, in fact. And as a result, I think we are all now looking towards the newcomers, being the Chinese from mainland China, weighing in. And for that, I certainly do think that having appropriate language skills would definitely be a plus. Because only if you can communicate with the person and they can understand you, that you can gain trust. And from that point onwards, then it will be a lot easier to fundraise.
Okay. You know, when your organizations, were founded 30 years ago, you said, 20 plus years ago, how did you go about, and we heard earlier about the importance of creating awareness within the Chinese community. How did you go about creating awareness? Because, when you started your organization, you were with CAMH at some point in time, but when you went on your own, how did you go about creating awareness within the Chinese community?
Well, actually, we were barely aware ourselves as to what we were doing. We just started as a ragtag group wanting to promote mental health. I think the identity came later. One of the first effort of reaching out is that we look at this huge stigma of mental illness in the Chinese community. So how do we reach out to these people? And I proposed at that time a very controversial kind of topic. I said, well, let's have a public seminar titled in Cantonese, 你會發神經嗎? 即係 would you get crazy? So people in my group sort of were very uncomfortable with that topic. They say, since we have such a stigma, why would you use such words like crazy and stuff? And I said, how do we get them to our seminar? And the first seminar was held at Cecil Street Community Center downtown. It was standing room only. It was packed, full. So I think that shows that people are curious. The topic actually got them thinking. If I just say a lecture on mental illness, nobody would have come. So the reaching out had to do with a shock value. Got to shock them out of their complacency and just come and listen to these issues. And our initial contact was within the Chinese community, trying to tell people you should look at mental health, not just heart, stroke, cancer. All these things are important, but mental health is also important. We tried also to outreach to Vietnamese community. And the first, I hope there are there Vietnamese here? I hope you're not offended. When we first approached the president of the Vietnamese Association, they felt insulted. They said, what do you mean? You think we have mental illness? So in terms of outreach, I think you have to start somewhere. And within our own community, our effort has been to increase awareness, and we've been doing that for 30 years. And last year, I was quite gratified when we had a group of people who volunteered to star in a TV series we put on Fairchild Television by Hong Fook. We actually have real patients that want to tell their story on the television. And to me, that was success.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to comment on how they sort of, the steps that you took or the tactics that you employed to sort of create awareness?
I just say, do not underestimate media. and don't be shy to share your successful experiences. So what we do with Care First is anytime we do something great, we would notify newspapers, radio stations. More often than not, they would publish that for you because they do need news too. And by doing that over and over and over, you're creating your own branding because they would have to know what your cause is, and media helps a lot. In the last many years, we do make use of a lot of the medias to promote our cause. It's able to help us to gain the exposure, or we have been saying awareness in the community. So I think that is important too.
I still remember and feel somebody tapped on my shoulder in 1994 at the Mandarin Club, as I was telling Larry last night. This person approached me and said, Kai, I think you should volunteer for us. And at that time, I just moved from Winnipeg. My house and my family was still in Winnipeg. I said, you're nuts. You know, I had to settle down first before I do any volunteer work. Let's talk about priority here. And the person was persistent and become very good friends to me, and never looked back. But the point is that he saw me already working in the community with, for example, the senator mentioned about the Freemasons, the Lees and the Wongs and the Lims and all those grassroots organizations. I was sort of handling the traditional Thai Chinese group, and then eventually branching into the Hong Kong Chinese, the Lions, like the Rotaries and all the other groups, and open the doors and say, come and look at us. Get involved, engage yourself. And I got a lot of 30 seconds briefings and say, go and tell the world, you do it. That's how it happened, that maintain the branding. On the other hand, never shy to answer the question with good and accurate and factual information about some doubt. People ask you, well, did it really happen? Was the money used appropriately? Was the fundraising cost really this low or high, and why? Those are very important branding questions that are back to what Sunny said. The media is a great help. No matter how many mailing you do, media is the cheapest value. But you better have a good story that's factual, that's sellable to the community. And sometimes it's helpful to have a spokesperson. Just grooming is important, but never let that person down. Otherwise, you'll be a disaster.
Sonia, I'm going to change gears. I want to talk about technology and the use of technology for soliciting donations. So, I guess two-part question. One is, does your organization use online mechanisms for accepting donations? And two, do you have any opinion on the community's comfort level with making donations online or using technology for fundraising purposes?
About 8 months ago, we completely revamped our website. And now, for the first time, we have online donations. So obviously, we hope that that will be something that people would do. I must say that so far, it hasn't been successful, which I think the key reason is because, as they were saying, we need to create awareness. Okay, so first of all, people have to know about your organization, know about your cause, buy into it before they'll do any online donation. Right. So in that sense, in terms of creating awareness, we are, I guess, in the last 2 years, have changed gears slightly. In the past, the awareness that we have created are mainly through the positioning of our directors and past chairpersons, right? So typically, you have professionals who are your directors, and it's through their personal relationship and so on and so forth that awareness has been created about the existence and what you do as a foundation. the last little while, we have tried to branch out, and it's an ongoing process into, I guess I would call it mainstream organizations. Mainstream organizations who are interested in doing business with China, and not just doing business with China and make money from it, as I said, but be able to appreciate Chinese culture. You know, earlier on we talked about understanding and so on, and how long it would take. Now this is one step forward, right? If you take the trouble to learn about what is behind the Chinese race and so on and so forth, that certainly would help. So that's one area that we are targeting. Another one I would say is partnership with mainstream organization, and this is something that we would do in a big way, and Justin knows about it. Justin is our vice chair. I won't divulge at this point in time. So I think technology certainly could help, should help. So far, it hasn't happened for us,
right,
but that's because we haven't gotten there yet.
And it's just been 8 months, right?
Yes.
Okay. So Kai, what's your general opinion? And I know I'm asking for a general opinion, but your general opinion of the community's comfort level with online, using online to either make donations or being approached or solicited.
Well, I can even relate to this technology in my own business, dealing with the North, including the high Arctic. For example, I do travel in the high Arctic myself, in Inuvik and Yellowknife and Kuujjuaq and all those places. And technology would enable us to provide information, but it would never cut the deal for you. Factual information is the provision value right now to me on the web at this point in time. Then I would diverge a bit more into a little bit over a year ago, perhaps 13 months, and today is the 8th or 9th, 6 days ago. I was downstairs singing Chinese opera for $20,000. That website donation, I don't think it generated too much, but we had $20,000 from the people that we know. It's all about relationship. It's not about how good Kai is singing or was singing. It's about people say, okay, you ask, well, Justin, come on, buy 2 tickets for me. And he did. But he didn't come. Sorry, just kidding. The point is back to the relationship building, then the branding, and then you keep that number of things happening over and over and over. People remember that. That's when other things are going to happen in the larger scale donations, in major gifts and all the other stuff that I am not involved with that stuff. So that's what I see. We met the goal at 35,000 that night downstairs with 650 people.
Okay, thank you. Sunny, did you want to weigh in on that?
Just online. I think it's working out. For us, we do have online donation. But as Kai said, we have to remember this is only a tool. We have to find a catalyst to make sure that people would actually get online. But I think in general, there are a lot of baby boomers who are our donors, and they are actually very competent with technology these days. So I think internet donation, it's the way to go. But you cannot just rely on that. You need to have a catalyst. Like an event, let's say your agency can join a marathon and ask people to donate for your cause, and then they get onto the internet. So internet donation will work, but you need a catalyst.
Maybe I could give you an anecdote. Last New Year Eve, I went to a party and met somebody who said, I want to make a donation to your organization, but I want a tax receipt for the year 2012, and Christmas Eve, New Year Eve. So I suggested, why don't you go online, make a donation, and you have proof that you donated in 2012. And he did that, and he's happy, he got his receipt. Now, I'll give you that story because there are 2 points I want to make. One is that it's a tool that's very useful. It makes it more convenient. and it makes it more efficient. But it does not replace the personal relationship. This man would not have donated if he did not see me at the party. That means I have to go to more parties. Technology does not replace human relationships. Why would someone donate to my organization versus Sonia's organization or anyone else's? I think I echo what people said here before, that in Chinese community is all relationship. And they have to like you, they trust you, and they trust your cause. So you never let them down. You be consistent, do your work day in, day out, and people will donate to you, they trust you. There was I got a phone call one year from an elderly couple. They called me up and say, "Why did you not sell me tickets to your gala this year?" I was thinking, maybe you're tired, they are getting advanced in years, and coming out at night wouldn't be something I want to bother them with. And then I learned my lesson. I think that you don't stop asking, because if you don't ask, people actually miss it. And technology can never replace that. You still need it.
It's a great point. Technology really is a tool, and oftentimes, with many agencies, we use it. We see it as a means to fundraising. I'm going to change the subject now, and I want to talk about events. In the mainstream sort of charitable sector, a lot of agencies are sort of downscaling events because of the ROI. The return on investment is quite low, but within the Chinese community, you see events everywhere. Is it because we don't understand the ROI component, or do we value, or is it because we value events, or we measure events differently? Comments.
I can only speak on behalf of my agencies. We do understand the ROI requirement from the Canada CRA. We do this. I think we do at least one major annual fundraiser every year, and many smaller events every year. The reason for that, I think, is also we always go back to exposure and awareness, because you've started doing it, and if you stop doing it 1 year, people will start to wonder what's going on with this agency. So I think consistency is very important, and ROI is important, right? Because you want to be able to explain to your donor that, we're very efficient. So that's one of the reasons that we keep on doing it. It's a lot of work, a lot of manpower spent on that, but the benefit, I think, is intangible. Your name's out there, exposure is out there, awareness is out there. You want to carry on the momentum. I think that's very, very important for fundraising.
Thanks, Eddie. Does anyone else want to weigh in on that?
Well, I want to tell you that in the first 10 years of our organization's existence, we did not do fundraising. We did not do events. We only started doing events about 20 years ago when we joined the United Way of Greater Toronto. Because before we were lazy, we depended on government funding, and I'm a psychiatrist, what do I know about fundraising? And I actually was very shy about asking people for money, and selling tickets was not my forte. So I put it off for 10 years, and then I discovered that the event is what the media loves. Reporters keep asking me, what are you doing next? Is there something we can write about? And it's not just about money. Events is an opportunity for you to go out and sell your organization, to tell people what work you do. For us, we want to tell people that mental health is important, that mental illness can be treated, there's hope. In fact, our theme this year is Blossom of Hope. We want to give that message. So it's not just raising funds, it's also about increasing awareness, public education. And maybe to overcome my own reticence about asking for money. When people used to give me a book of raffle ticket to sell, I end up buying it all and not selling it. But
you too, right?
But then later, I met a Buddhist friend who is a Buddhist, and he told me that, do you know that when you ask people for money, you're helping that person? you're helping the donor, because the Buddhist philosophy, 布施, in order to in order to enter nirvana and in order to get saved, you have to give. So by asking people for money, I'm giving them a chance of redemption and to salvation. So now I have no problem selling you tickets.
I think that is a very good point. You know, if you think about, I don't know, this is my personal view. It seems that within the Chinese communities, there are umpteen, you know, fundraisers. You know, practically every weekend you have them, and sometimes, you know, the group actually is not that big. The same people, more or less, the same group of people are involved, and typically, you know, that if somebody asks you to support their function and you don't, then when your turn comes around, they may not support you. But I think that, you know, going by what Peter just said about, you know, the Buddhist theory and so on, fundamentally or you know, innately, I think the Chinese in the old days and still very much practiced today is what we have, which is ancestral worship. And the things that come with it is, you know, if you do good deeds, then your children and your grandchildren and your future generations would somehow benefit from it. And I think that somewhere along the line, underneath it all, we have that in you, passed on from past generations. And so you just kind of started to do it. And you know these things, once you start, they have you on their mailing list. And you can never get off. So.
You know, with
If I
sorry,
may just add one more point, and I share this point in my breakout session. I was like Peter when I first started doing fundraising. I hated it, and the agency put me into the foundation board when I wanted to work on the service board, and I said, I think I belong to the service board more than the foundation board because I don't want to ask people for money. I'd rather give than ask because I think asking is embarrassing. But I don't know what happened to me. Somewhere along the line, I got used to it maybe. But then in deep within me, and I've been telling myself, okay, I'm asking for money, but I'm not asking for myself. I'm asking for the agency. So I think part of that, my skin is getting thicker and thicker, although not as thick as Peter maybe. But it helped. Knowing the fact that I'm not asking money for myself, right? I don't even want to think what the other side is thinking of me anymore. I just go, this is the cost. We need money, and whether or not you can help, and that's what I do. And going back to what Benson said earlier, when they say yes, it didn't really mean. It may not necessarily mean yes, and which is true. But what I learned is when they say maybe or I'll think about that, which means no.
Well, I think it's also a matter of congruency. What I mean is that the volunteer that you want to engage versus the services or the issue or the mission that you have has to be congruent. That's the drive, the first step. You know, if you don't believe in something, you really can't go and sell it. No matter how good you are as a salesperson, if you know one job, one product perhaps, you were never able to be passionate about what you do, number one. And number two, I would look for the chemistry of working, the internal working of the organization versus how they make me feel, for example. I think that's very critical. Just because I look different, it doesn't make me less of a Canadian, and don't treat me as such. I see you as the same regardless of who you are. I'm really blind from that perspective. You are a person in front of me, and I expect exactly the same. But only give me the job that I can deliver. And the job that I am delivering today, I wasn't able to do that in 1991. because all the time I gain experience and exposure and training and all the other stuff to get to where I am. And those are the important factors. Now, that become a contradicting problem that in the inspiring donations session, fundraiser has a goal that you have to deliver. Because, I mean, we all know the media would ask, so why is your fundraising cost so high if you're not delivering the goods, meaning generating the income based on the expenses you incur with your team of staff and even volunteers. So that's a dilemma when you are dealing with a community that value and, in fact, very critical about relationship. That's actually what sells. And that's what closed the deal. So there has to be a balancing act there somewhere. Special event is an expensive event proposition. The Revenue Canada tax rule says, you have to account for all these expenses. So can you really do it without being nailed about, hey, why is your fundraising cost is 80%? Because you're going to pay for the hotel, the venue, the food, and the services, and all the other stuff. So you have to find a way to do that without being, I guess, being criticized by the media. For good, for the number itself, they don't look into why. And that's the dilemma for all of us.
I want to, at this point in time, turn to the floor for some questions of our panel members. Don't be shy. They don't bite. If you can just step to the microphone.
Hi. Well, sorry. Didn't expect it. I'm Samantha. I am one of the member of the AFP Inclusions and Equities Committee and also the Chinese Advisory Group. As one of the team member who organized this conference, and I guess that I can see that this is the question that I'd like to ask, and also I guess that I hope that I can also on behalf of some of our audience today, because most of us are fundraisers. We find that you groups are great because you are volunteer, you're a donor, and you also dedicated yourself to help those great cause to your charity. My question is how we, as an organization, as a fundraiser, how we can recruit you for your group to help our organization. So I guess you may want to let us know what triggered you the most, so you dedicated your time and also your effort, even also your money, to this organization.
Give me more time.
Anyone else? Sonia?
I guess your question is, what is it that we can do what is that you can do, AFP can do, so that it would make our fundraising efforts to be easier? Is that your question?
No, it's the recruitment.
Yeah.
How we, as an organization, if I am the organizer, I'm a charity, I'm a fundraiser, and of course, I can see how successful that if our charity can recruit, like you, Sonja, and also Peter, and everybody is on the stage to help us. But if we want to organize this kind of group, how we can recruit you to help our charity?
So if she wanted to get you, Sonia, involved in her charity.
And not only me, I know that you're already involved with us.
But I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but I actually don't quite understand exactly what does AFP do. Oh. Perhaps you could enlighten us on that.
And maybe
first?
that's, and maybe we can sort of speak, generically. So if a charity were to approach, and the session's about engaging the Chinese community. Right? So if a charity were to approach any one of us to be a volunteer, to be a donor, what are some of the things that they could do to convince you to say yes? How to get you to yes?
Okay, it's a question we ask ourselves because our group is getting older. I myself has passed retirement age, and I'm looking at the group of volunteers who has worked for Hong Kong for 30 years. We started with black hair, now we have white, and some have no hair at all. So we're asking the same question you're asking: how do we recruit new volunteers, younger volunteers, who can carry on the work? And I don't think when we think about it, it's not that different from asking for money. We ask people for money. What is money? Money is you spend time and effort earning it, and you're giving it away to Hong Kong or any other charity. So we're asking for something different. We're asking for time and their effort. So it's the same thing we're asking for. How do we engage them? I think that they have to connect with your cause, right? People who volunteer for us, people who have been touched by mental health or family members been touched by mental health issues, they're more likely to identify with us. But some of them simply like the idea of helping this organization. I think the connection is, you have to connect. Sonia is asking a very direct question. So in order to sell your organization, you really have to convince your target either to give money or give their time.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry, I was being slappy because I learned sometimes just say no by give me more time, because time is actually a premium among so many of us. On the other hand, the question was well said, is exactly it, is the branding. You really need to go back and do some branding and say, hey, this is what we are, this is who we are, and inspire me and engage me. I remember in 1994 when somebody tapped my shoulder, I will not talk to you. And the discussion was well done. It was well done, and it's wide open. Any questions, come on in, we'll take a look, show you around. They didn't ask me anything. And I fought and said, no, I'm not coming. The phone call kept coming. And I gave up. I gave in, basically. And no regret today. No regret. But again, it's the time, the premium. Ask me for a check, not that I have a lot of money. It's easy to get out of it. Ask for my time is actually really tough, because I think most of us are very much in demand. As you are busy bees, we are too. And it's tough. I only limit myself into 3. And that's the business, family, and then community. The 3 pillars. They had to be balanced, or they fall apart. That's the trick.
I just have one final thing to supplement. Before I joined CARE First, I was the president for Rotary Club. So what they had done to me was they started early asking me, and I think timing is important. When they asked me, I understand their costs already. I had been to a few of the events. I know their clients. I know who would be benefiting from their organization. But my time was not sufficient. I had no time to join another agency. But they were persistent. They just kept on coming back to me, and time after time. And by the time when I retired from my presidencies, and then they came and asked me again, I still stalled for another year. But after that, and I was impressed about the consistency, and they were able to tell me, Sonny, this is what you have, this is how you can help us. Can you help me? So they were able to identify maybe my traits that I would be able to help this particular agency. And I thought about that, okay, maybe I can do that. So I joined them.
Thank you. But we are lucky for our committee that you already agreed to be one of our advisory committees, right? For the question regarding what we are doing as the AFP, I think that Christians will have a great answer.
I think also, to your point is I think the reason why we're all here is through relationships. And we all know Justin Hoy. And I think that's another approach that one can take when you want to solicit and engage volunteers and donors. There's another question.
Hi, I'm Anne from Wood Green. I was very interested when you were talking about events, because sort of mainstream fundraising says events are actually terrible for visibility. So I was very interested because several of you said that, people actually came to you and said, where's your event? Like you couldn't discontinue it, and that media actually, it sounded like got your message right. So can you talk a little bit more specifically about how you accomplished that? Because I think we have something we can learn from you.
I think it's repetition. I mean, if you have done it time after time after time, they expect that to happen, right? So if you had not asked them this year, and then they may come back to you, and just like what Peter had just said, what happened? You never invited me this year. So I think the repetition and consistency is important on that.
And just to add to that, perhaps you need to think of doing something different outside the box. It's easy for me to sit here and talk about thinking and doing things that are outside the box because we haven't done that for the longest time, and it's only, actually the last few months that we have started to think about and started to do things that are outside the box. And it's when that happens that you will be able to get the attention.
And I think it's also important that I think we all need to know and understand how the Chinese media itself works. I'm sure if some of you know somebody from Globe and Mail, it's easier to get a story on than any one of us who had no clue who to call even, or just fax them a news release. Same goes with the Chinese media as well. And it's some are national, some are local. And then you have compound by the subculture of the traditional font, for example, on print, versus the simplified font, which is the emerging the Chinese mainland. And then you look at the donor base, and then you look at then the web-based news media as well. You have radio, you have TV, and then you have print. And in fact, the Singtao Daily is thicker than Toronto Star today. It's owned by Toronto Star. But they operate independently.
Yeah, maybe I can add that I think what we try to do at Hong Fok is we try to create a buzz. We went on the radio and television to talk about mental health. We have interviews. And it's amazing how many people actually listen to the Chinese radio when they drive. And the evening TV has been well watched in the community. So we created some buzz about mental health issues. And when the event comes, people want to come.
Thank you.
A little bit advertising. 14:30 a.m. when you drive home, turn it on. That's Fairchild AM radio. You'll be amazed how powerful that is.
My name is Laura Valancourt, and I'm here today representing my client, who is Ontario Philharmonic. Ontario Philharmonic is based in the Durham region, and it also performs at Kerner Hall at Royal Conservatory of Music campus. My point about Ontario Philharmonic is that it is diversity in action. There are over 21 languages spoken on Ontario Philharmonic's stage. It is, even though it's in its 6th decade, it still is in its infancy. And I'm hearing a lot today about the number of decades put in by leaders such as yourself in growing and cultivating your community, and specifically, in this case, the Asian community. And I just would like to say that I'm really appreciative of this. The title of today is Diversity to Inclusion. And this, for me, takes me back to when I was a child and Pierre Elliott Trudeau made the declaration that Canada was a multicultural society. And I am so pleased that you are all, and all of the people in the audience as well, are representative of my Canada, the one I was inspired to look toward when I was a child, when those words were spoken. And I appreciate deeply the commitment that you made even before you became the nonprofit leaders. You had to commit to a new country. You had to leave many things behind, and you had to rebuild. And there probably is still some seeking of that word home in a number of you. And I want to let you know that from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate that that cost, that effort that you put in becoming Canadian. That's it.
I want to say thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
I just want to touch upon the events. Actually, if you look at the Chinese newspaper and Chinese media, the event happens everywhere. I can guarantee you tonight there will be at least three events, and I'm going to one of them. And you may, actually this topic come up again and again. You may ask why? Why the Chinese people are so fond of events? And if you, some of you may already attend the Chinese event. If you attend the Chinese event, today's conference is no comparison because everybody's so quiet, right? In the Chinese events, everybody's talking while the speaker is speaking on the stage. You know why? They are networking. They are busy networking. So events is an occasion for networking. We have stressed again and again in the Chinese community is establish networking. You don't go to the event, try to promote yourself and get a big donation. No, it's the cultivating a relationship among the people. That's how you know people, and you this time, so I'm invite to tonight's event. Next time, I'm invite them over. They may bring few friends over, and eventually, you get the network. Eventually, you can get a donation. So that's just my personal comment.
Thank you, Hugh. You know, certainly I've been, it wasn't until I sort of met Justin that I attended and participated in many events in the Chinese community, and it really is a very different experience than going to a typical mainstream event purely for that purpose, networking. People are working the room aggressively. And I think that what makes running an event in the Chinese community very different than, let's say, in the mainstream. We don't measure the ROI in dollars and cents, you know, how much goes into the event, how much we bring back. But as the panel was sort of indicating, there's a lot more that goes into it. It's the relationships, it's the engagement, it's the visibility, it's the awareness building that goes into an event, and that all gets measured in some shape or form into the ROI. Are there other questions?
I'm wondering if we can take a moment and look into the future, let's say in about 10 years. What would you say or predict the world will look like, or Canada, or perhaps your charities will look like as it relates to our relationships with the Chinese community as nonprofit leaders, as fundraisers?
Anyone?
I think the short answer to that is I think the demographic mix in the Chinese community is actually changing. And as you may know, there's a major influx of mainland Chinese coming into Canada. And I think in 10 years' time, the successful agencies or foundation would definitely have individuals from mainland China to be able to tap into that community. As I said, I won't be able to tap into that community myself. I'm trying, I'm learning the language, but I think in 10 years' time, that would be the way to go. I mean, the Chinese from mainland China would have a bigger share in fundraising in the community.
Let me borrow an example about what's going on today already in the business sector, particularly the IT side, when the traditional culture wasn't there, and it quickly into just a talent-based and language-based. So long as you're competent in both, you're in, and you're going to do it. And then look at the banking and the insurance and other businesses. They're already doing what I think the NGO, the nonprofit sectors should be doing in the next 10 years, I think. It's a evolving, changing goal to become real Canadians. It's not to create the old term is what I call gâteau, but the new term is to me an isolated strategy. But it has to be a broader, integrated strategy to not only come to the Chinese community for funding, but also engage community and not hiring or engaging any one of us just because you want us to be in for the Chinese community, but in a larger, broader spectrum of things as real Canadians, and also provide services back as well. That's just common sense to me. It's happening in the IT and the banking industry already. You can see it when you walk into a bank branch. It happened.
Sonia?
I just want to say that I agree with Sunny that in 10 years' time, the Chinese from mainland China should play a much bigger role in terms of fundraising. But in order for a portion of that fundraising to benefit the mainstream, you know, aside from activities and charities within the Chinese community, I also think that there has to be, hopefully, a more concerted effort in having the mainstream society understand the psyche of ethnic Chinese, particularly the ones from mainland China. And recently, I think most of us know about the proposed takeover of Nexon by Sinopec, which is you know, a state-owned enterprise of China. And I have been working on a project for the foundation for the last 2 years, which, you know, the success of which is partially dependent on China-Canada relations. As a result, almost every day in the last few months, I have gone on the internet and searched Nexon. Read all the articles that was written on it, you know, mainstream newspapers, whatever, and the comments, particularly the comments from Canadians, your general Canadians. And some of the comments are shocking in terms of how mainstream Canadians look upon China, look upon Chinese people. I know that, you know, the immigrants from China, mainland China, cannot be equated to how one perceives the Chinese government being a communist government, whatever that means these days. But I think that, you know, the negative sensitivity towards that, you know, inherently, the immigrants from mainland China would feel that. You would feel the way people look at you, the way people look at China. And I just want to put forth and say that, you know, China has a 5,000-year history, and essentially, it has never been democratic. You know, think about it. If you have 2 children, you have 2 kids in a typical Canadian family. China's population is about 40 times that of Canada. It's dinner time, and you ask your 2 children, okay, what do you want to eat? What do you want to eat? And you plan your dinner menu accordingly. If you have 80 kids, if you have 80 children, you are going to say, this is what we're eating tonight, that's it, end of story. So, I have said perhaps too much, but my point is that, you know, that we need to do more to create more understanding between Canadians that have been here for a long time and the newcomers. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. did you want to?
Yes, maybe I would just go back to what Sonia said in the beginning about the hierarchy of needs. The Maslow's hierarchy of needs actually start with food, shelter, healthcare, and other things. Let's not forget the new immigrants from China. They have the same needs. They need food and shelter. They need a job. They need options, healthcare and everything. And sooner or later, you would not be able to tell them apart, except from their appearance, from other Canadians. If you look at the early wave of immigrants from China, the Toisanese, you wouldn't see them as not Canadian. They probably speak with a Canadian accent, no longer any Toisanese accent. The next generation of Vietnamese that came in 1970s, many of them are doctors, lawyers, professionals, and you can't tell them apart either. Although we have a multicultural society, we are also a melting pot. Looking around this room, I was born in China. I grew up in Hong Kong. And most of my friends don't see me as being foreign. They were surprised when they hear that I graduated from University of Hong Kong, and that was my first degree. I got my medical degree there. So I consider myself assimilated Canadian. The next wave of immigrants from China will go through the same process. Canada is a great country. You are able to accommodate new immigrants. I think Sonia's concern I share is the current, not so much, I don't know if it's political, there seems to be a bit of China bashing in the media, American politics, American election, for some reason it was vote getting to bash China. And as a psychiatrist, I see that as more of a psychological issue, that why they need to do that. I think some countries need to have an enemy. When Russia fell apart, there's no enemy there. So China is the natural substitute, or nowadays it's Middle East. But some mentality, I think nations are not that different from individuals in terms of psyche. And sometimes collectively we may need to have a common enemy to sell more arms maybe, to create more great for the economy. But I think I wouldn't worry about 10 years. I have faith in Canada that we can absorb all these new immigrants and make them productive Canadians.
Thank you, and I think we're out of time. Is that right, Christian? So on behalf of AFP, I'd like to thank all the panel members. I also wanted just to summarize this panel's conversation. The one takeaway that I will leave with is this community is a community that is worth investing, but you have to invest, and it's not an overnight fix. It's a relationship. So it's a long-term solution, and with Hong Fook and with the others as well. 20, 30 years ago, it took them multiple years in order to penetrate their own community. And if you are committed to investing in the community, you will see success. So on behalf of the panel members and AFP, thank you so much. And Justin.
Thank you very much, Larry. If you could just pass these out. On behalf of AFP, we'd like to thank all of you for coming to speak. And we make a small donation to the charity of your choice as a token of our appreciation. I'm just going to wrap this up in a few minutes. And Doris, if you could please come up, I have a card for you as well for participating in our roundtables. Thank you very much. Hello. Is this on? Yeah. First of all, I'm going to make this very brief. I'm just going to get to a couple of points here. First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming today. It was the first of the whole series, so hopefully we've set a good precedent for the following ones. There's a little trial and error at the beginning. I want to thank AFP for even asking me, because honestly, I learned a lot, and this has been a great experience. And thank you very much, Krishan. And also, I want to recognize Cynthia Quigley from AFP as well. Thank you very much for all the work that you did. I want to thank all the speakers, because I know you guys are really busy, and I won't call you for like at least a week. And, you know, it was interesting, as I was talking to people downstairs, one thing that we seem to have missed, and we didn't get to that because there wasn't enough time, but is are people like myself who are second-generation Chinese. So I was born here in Canada, but I have a huge amount of loyalty to the Chinese community. In fact, a lot of times when I do things with, it doesn't matter whether it's a Chinese charity or it's a mainstream organization, I always like to do something with the Chinese lens on. I like to know, you know, how does it benefit the Chinese community? But the good thing is, I'm fully westernized, so when I say no, it actually means no. And, yeah. You know, I heard a couple of people downstairs say that, you know, I mean, I was just sort of eavesdropping, but I heard them say, well, this kind of isn't really different from how we do things with everybody else. Okay, so there's some nuances I want to clear up here. And maybe something was lost in translation, which is weird because this was in English. But the first thing I want to say is that when we talk about taking your time to actually know somebody, I don't think that it was properly spelled out what that means. So I'm going to give an example, Benson, I hope you don't mind. But Benson and I have known each other, I think I wasn't even finished university yet. And unfortunately, we share a number of health issues that actually have brought us together, and we're brothers for that. But what happened was, I mean, I've known him since the early 90s or mid-90s. We got involved in one of these golf competitions or whatnot, and there really was no fundraising aspect. These guys, bunch of guys playing golf. And, but over time, we've gotten involved, we've joined together, we donate to each other's causes. And most of you are probably thinking, oh man, that's like over 20 years. Okay, it's not going to be like that with everybody, but trust me, friendship, it has to be genuine. And I know all of you are very friendly, and I know I've met with enough fundraisers to know, you know, that you are, many of you are very nice, and if you invite me out to lunch, usually it will start with, sorry, I'm just being really frank here, but it'll start with a personal conversation, and then comes out the folder with the information and with the pre-filled pledge form. And then, you know, if you do that, especially with the Chinese from the mainland community, I guarantee you, instant turn off, okay? Now, you may think to yourselves, okay, I don't have that much time. Like, I'm busy. And how can I keep going out with these people and not bringing up the fact about business? Well, there's a reason why Chinese restaurants are open so late. Because we are all hanging out and talking, and we're not talking about each other's business most of the time. In fact, a lot of us, yeah, actually, there's a guy I knew for 5 years, and he asked me what I do for a living. We don't talk about that, but there's a magic moment, and I don't really know when that magic moment is. It's a little bit different for everybody. But when it happens, and you need that support, you will get that support. And that's probably what a lot of organizations that are not Chinese organizations don't understand. Now, you hire fundraisers, you hire managers, and who is in the right mind is going to volunteer to do all those dinners, right? So what you can do is make sure you put together a good team of volunteers that is plugged into the network, and they enjoy that, and they do that. They do the socializing, which leads me to my next point, which came up in one of the breakout sessions, which is there is a high turnover in your industry. So you spend all this time getting to know somebody, and then you leave, and then they get a call from somebody they don't recognize. Honestly, that's a problem, because that gives an excuse for that prospect to say, hey, let's start all over again. So what you need is, just like institutional memory, when you have a succession of vice presidents or CEOs, you need like a cultural contact memory. I make up terms like that so you'll repeat them, and then maybe one day I'll be credited with coining it. But cultural contact memory really is making sure that it doesn't matter who's there, that your advisory council is solid, like completely solid. It doesn't matter who is the lead at your organization, that group never fails. And I'm not going to mention any names, but there have been organizations that have lost 2 decades of investment in the Chinese community because they did not maintain those contacts. It just completely died. And that's a shame because, you know, some events, some big events, they become sort of a hallmark of the community. The other thing is that I heard in one of the breakouts was, oh, we should really understand what the Chinese community appreciates. Well, that's great. So if you want to do something revolved around culture or art, that's fantastic. But make sure you do your research because you also have to understand what they definitely will not appreciate. Okay, so again, I don't like to mention any names, but there are some dissident organizations that are not very China-friendly that put on cultural performances, and they may call you up. And you're thinking, hey, that's awesome. You know, and they say, yeah, we fill up a theater, we got 30,000, why don't we joint venture? In fact, I've gotten calls from them, and I've told them, I said, you know what, you can partner, but I guarantee you, you'll never get Hugh to come to one of those events, you'll never get Richard to come, and you'll probably have zero relationship with the Chinese government or anybody that's doing business with China. So you have to really research where your contacts are coming from as well, and know a bit about their background, and really check that as well. You have to get to know how the groups are changing. As everybody has mentioned here, we are getting such an influx of mainland Chinese coming here. Nobody really understands them fully. I mean, honestly, Alan Ma, who was up here, is probably the closest I've ever come to that really gives me the insight from the China perspective because he's been here since the 80s, but he's clearly very immersed in his own community. If you want to reach that market, it's going to take a lot of time. Don't expect overnight results. And when I say time, I mean it could take, you might have 2 or 3 successors by the time your organization is successful. But all I can say is if you don't do it, then somebody else will. And so there's going to be somebody who has the stamina to do it. So it's whether or not you do have the stamina. And I think that pretty much, you know, concludes what I've... oh, thanks for turning the lights on. How is it? Wow. Yeah, okay, I can't even read my own notes, but anyway. I want to thank everybody for coming today, and please feel free to stay. We are here till, I think, like 6:15, and talk to our panelists and talk amongst yourself. Thank you.
I just want to, before we get out of our seats here, I just want to take a moment and thank Justin Poi. This conference, Justin, wouldn't have happened without you. Your leadership, your connections, your contacts, your support, the media attention we've received, this entire thing. So on behalf of everyone at AFP, everyone in this room, thank you so much for making this such a success and for kicking off this series with such tremendous energy. So that's, it's very special to have you as part of our team. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
We also have an envelope for you. It's a different looking envelope, and there's a charity of your choice that's going to really benefit from a lot of love in the room tonight. Just a couple of quick comments here. I just want to remind you that tomorrow you will be receiving an email, an evaluation form about this conference. We really want your feedback, so if you could please just take 5 minutes and fill out the form, that will help us inform the work we do going forward, so please do that. I want to take the opportunity to also thank the very large and well-rounded advisory group that put this day together along with Justin. The names are listed there in the program, but this is a group effort, really is. And so I want to take the opportunity to thank everyone who was involved in organizing this. So join me, please. So just a quick plug for the January 25th event at the Bram and Bluma Appel Salon at the Toronto Reference Library on January 25th, where we'll be focusing on South Asian philanthropy in the community. I hope that you'll be able to join us there. Check out our website, afpinclusivegiving.ca, for more information there about panelists and speakers, as well as some information that will be coming your way through our AFP listserv. So have a great evening, everyone. We have some networking refreshments downstairs, and let's keep the conversation alive. Thank you.